Welcome to Forensic Friday,
where we examine the intersection of true crime, psychology, and the heart of being human in the middle of it all. I am so happy to be with you tonight doing this
Same.
because it almost didn't happen.
I know.
So we are going to share the whole story with you guys at some point.
Mhm.
But Natalie decided to up and almost die. What, a week ago almost?
Yeah, so a week and a couple days ago.
Week and a couple days ago.
Yeah, like literal near-death experience.
Pretty scary. We now have a new forensic friend who saved Natalie's life.
He doesn't know he's a forensic friend yet.
He doesn't know yet, but he's going to get a sweatshirt in the mail and we're going to recruit him.
Yes, yeah, Mr. DeMarcus, we love him.
We shout out DeMarcus. We love you so much.
He literally saved my life.
Give the man a medal. We give
I
people
know.
awards for everything. This man saved my best friend. So
Yeah.
give the guy a medal.
Give the guy a medal. Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I feel lucky because I have family in the military. If I didn't have family in the military, I would have had no clue that, like,
That's a thing.
that's a thing, like, honoring someone with something like that, like, you did this heroic thing for someone you don't know, I just didn't know
Yes.
that was a thing, and my big brother was like, "No, this is a thing, and we should shoot for it," and I was like, "Absolutely, just tell me what to do because I have no clue what to do."
Oh, he's in the Air Force. And we're going to tell the whole story in a couple weeks. We're giving Nat a minute just to reacclimate to the world.
Mhm.
Thank God.
Oh my God, could you imagine?
No, I don't want to. It's too soon. Yeah, no. Nat and I are we're in full comfort mode these days. Like, there's not a sweatshirt in the world that could help me with the stress of the last week. But boy, did it try. It tried real hard. I came home and just wore my sweats every night and cried. I just pretty much cried every day until I knew you were okay and I could see your face.
Well, that's been like the thing. It's like everyone on the outside, I think, has such a different experience. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I was telling my brother about it, my twin. So I have an older brother who did the Air Force,
Yep.
retired, and then I have my twin brother. This is telling my twin brother my story for the first time a couple days ago, and he just starts crying. And I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm not even crying. I
Mm-mm.
probably could if I actually got into like this
Oh,
without just telling the facts. But yeah, I think on like if I was on the receiving end of like my twin almost dying, I would be probably a bigger wreck than
all
he
right.
was. Or you almost dying, right? Like it's like
Oh,
if I was on the receiving end of that, then I'm gonna have different emotion around it.
well, yeah. And, you and I, we love vulnerability. Part of this podcast is getting people to connect with their feelings. That
Mhm.
being said, you and I are not people who cry a lot. We're just not
Mm-mm.
big criers. I
Mm-mm.
think probably we go to anger first. We're a little sassy.
I go to sarcasm,
Sarcasm, maybe a little bit of anxiety. I think,
joking. Sometimes I joke.
oh yeah, we morbid sense of humor, but we're
Mhm.
not big criers. And I can tell you honestly with a straight face, I've cried every single day. This is the first day that I did not cry because I got to hang out with you all day. So
Aw.
we are so thankful, buddy, that you're okay. And we will tell the listeners the whole story in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, at some point,
At
they
some
will get
point,
it all.
we're still in recovery mode.
Yes.
We are going to follow up on the
Mhm.
borderline episode from last time.
Yeah.
So tonight, we're actually going to talk about narcissistic personality disorder.
Good.
I
This is
know.
something we need to cover.
And it's something that you and I treat and deal with every day. Like, this is
Yeah.
probably a large percentage of our caseload. And so I know we both feel very comfortable talking about this one. I'm hoping we can debunk some myths and give some definitions and make things a little bit easier to understand.
Yes. One thing I want to say about it before we jump in, and I'm sorry if you
Yeah.
already have this written down. Similar to borderline, right? We talked about how like not all difficult women are borderline.
Yes.
Not all selfish humans are narcissists,
Absolutely.
right? Like we
Absolutely.
all have a degree of selfishness. Every single person does,
Yes.
right? And so I think sometimes when that selfishness is really loud, people go automatically to, well, you're just a narcissist. And that's not the case always.
Yes. Absolutely. That's so important and grounding for our conversation.
Hmm.
And I wanted to mention too that we had a listener reach out whose son has antisocial personality disorder. And
Hmm.
they were talking about how challenging it is to be the parent, but how much they love their child. And I thought that was beautiful and normal in
Hmm.
the sense that when our kids, our brothers and sisters, our parents, whoever, when they're struggling with something, it doesn't change the love. We love our people.
Hmm.
And so the personality disorders are especially challenging because if it was medical, it would look different. If it was a mental health disorder that we understand better, like anxiety, we don't typically get mad at people for being anxious.
Right.
The behavior in the personality disorders just suck. The behaviors suck so much and they
Yep.
feel intentional, and sometimes they are very intentional.
Hmm.
And so it's just painful. And so what we hope to do tonight is destigmatize it a little bit,
Yeah.
be a little more accurate, and
Hmm.
also give you some tips on like how to deal with it and
Yep.
what kind of treatment actually can help folks with narcissistic personality disorder.
Yep.
So again, just like with borderline, we don't want to call people narcissists. It's not terribly helpful. It is sometimes a shortcut when we're talking, so we may do that tonight just to make it easier to talk about, but
Hmm.
it's not labeling. We need to not label people as narcissists. They are people with narcissistic personality disorder, and that distinction is important. And we do have narcissistic behaviors,
Hmm.
and there's a spectrum and a continuum to narcissism, just like everything else.
Yep.
So, what percentage of the US population do you think in the US, I should specify in the US this year, so this is an accurate to date statistic, what percentage of the US population have narcissistic personality disorder?
Hate when you ask me these questions because I don't know. Hold on, let me guess. 17%.
Oh, that's high. 1 to 2.
Oh.
But here's what I will say. If you were to ask people in their life, okay, like if we were to sit down with someone and say, how many people in your life are narcissists? Or how many people have you known who are narcissists? They would actually probably give a decently high number. They're certainly not going to say 1 in 100 because
Right.
I think narcissistic behavior touches all of us,
Right.
whether the person is diagnosable or not.
Right. They might not meet all the criteria.
Exactly. So at 1 to 2% in the US population are diagnosable clinical range narcissistic personality disorder. Now, in a clinical population, that's higher. In
Hmm.
our clinical population, it's much higher.
Hmm.
So we have a much higher prevalence in our facility in the work that we do of narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. So you and I work with this more than the average bear anyway, even in a clinical sense.
Right.
But the prevalence is really 1 to 2 out of 100 people.
Which is really not a lot.
It's not actually that many people that are clinical narcissists in that sense, but we talk about it like you said, like it's every single person who's
Yep.
difficult. So, I'm going to give kind of a broad definition, but this is really the clinical definition, and then we're going to dial in a little bit.
Perfect.
So, narcissistic personality disorder is severe, persistent, and problematic. It is a pervasive problem of grandiosity, which is a sense of superiority, need for admiration, and lack of empathy, beginning by early adulthood and occurring in a variety of contexts. So it has to be kind of global in the sense that it affects multiple areas of somebody's life,
Mhm.
persistent over the years, and is creating problems. That's essentially the benchmark. And then we have specific ones I'll get into later.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought it would be helpful to share the actual diagnostic criteria. So
Perfect.
what we've already talked about with it being pervasive, all of that across the lifespan, like from late adolescence on.
Mhm.
But basically, you need to have five of the following, at least five of the following criteria to be diagnosable. And again, the person who would be diagnosing is the therapist, not you, but these are the things you're looking for. Having a grandiose sense of self-importance, such as exaggerating achievements and talents, expecting to be recognized as superior even without commensurate achievement. So, what this means is this person expects to be the most important person in the room, probably paid the most, really needs people to acknowledge their talents, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And this one shows up a ton at work. This is the one that I think people see at work a lot.
Mhm.
Maybe they do less work, but they want more admiration.
Yep.
Second one, preoccupation with fantasies of success, power, beauty, and idealization. So what that means is they're just kind of preoccupied with always more, always better.
Mhm.
And we see that quite a bit. Belief in being special and that they can only be understood by or associated with other high status people or institutions. This has shown up for me when I'm counseling somebody and they look at me and go, "You're so smart. You're probably the only person that could figure me out and work with me."
Mm.
Uh-huh.
That also lines up with borderline a little.
Well, borderline is that whole like I love you immediately kind of thing, and
Yeah.
then it's
I
I
hate
hate
you.
you, don't leave me, right? Which is very complicated.
Yep.
This shows up a little bit like that, but definitely, they're imparting something very special and different.
Yep.
Demanding excessive admiration. It's kind of never enough. Like if somebody gives you a gift and your thank you is just never enough,
Mhm.
that's a trait. Doesn't mean they're a narcissist, but it just means
Mhm.
that's a trait, right? Sense of entitlement. I should have XYZ for reasons that are unknown to the other person. It's just they just
Yep.
should because they just should in their own mind.
Yep.
Exploitation behaviors. So when they're taking advantage of other people, lack of
Mhm.
empathy, envy towards others, or believing that other people are envious of them.
Mhm.
So this shows up a lot in therapy when somebody's like, well, so and so at work, they don't like me. They complained about me to their boss,
Mhm.
to our boss, but
Mhm.
they're just jealous.
Mhm.
It's like, okay,
Mhm.
cool, cool, cool.
Mhm.
May or may not be true. Maybe it's true, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna give you the hairy eyeball on that one.
Yep.
Arrogant, haughty behaviors and attitudes.
Hmm.
We see this quite a bit.
Mhm.
This is the most annoying one to me, actually, of all of them,
Yeah.
because
It's pretty hard.
they bring the heat, but then they can take none.
None.
So it's a little bit exhausting because it's like, okay, I'll bite. Like you wanna get into it, like I can get into it, and then it's like
Right.
massive meltdown. It's either an
Yeah.
explosion or retreat or crying or just something weird happens every time. And I don't like that. Like if you're gonna
I
come
know.
for me, that's fine, but let's have a conversation and they can't do that.
Right.
It's very hard for them. So
Yes.
that's the official criteria. So if you have five or more of those, or your loved one has five or more of those, you may be dealing with the clinical range of narcissism.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's hard because oftentimes individuals who are either close to being diagnosable or who are diagnosable, people in their life aside from the people who are closest don't see it
Yeah, they don't always see it. That's true.
because they can be really charming,
Mm-hmm.
very likable by people who
Oh
aren't close
yeah.
to them. And those traits don't necessarily come out until you know them better.
Yes. Or until they're under pressure or until they're criticized, something like that can bring it out of
Mhm.
them.
Yep,
And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
exactly. It's loud.
Do you remember that old episode of How I Met Your Mother when they like have these realizations about each other and it's like glass cracking, like they can't unsee this trait that this person has now that it's out in the open. That
Mhm.
is how narcissism is. Like once you actually identify it, then you start to see it,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about that I'm kind of passionate about is the dichotomy in narcissistic personality disorder between this like grandiosity and the vulnerability. So you have this combination of someone who really has a little bit of an inflated sense of self, but also has a poor, deep, deep, deep down self concept. So they're not confident, they don't have a secure sense of identity. And so, because of that, they have rejection sensitivity. This is, to be frank, when a lot of folks show their narcissistic behavior is when they get pushed either by a boundary or a confrontation or a work review or something like that. And they just cannot tolerate that
Mhm.
level of vulnerability. It is so uncomfortable to them because deep down, they're actually a little bit insecure to begin,
Yep. Yep.
which is so confusing when somebody comes in a suit and they're talking a good game and they're acting like they're friends with everybody and they're all great. And then all of a sudden, they can kind of flip a switch and you're like,
Mhm.
who is this person?
Yeah.
They had that little button pushed,
Yep.
you know?
I think it's interesting. Um, I won't say their name, but you and I have a professor who was self-diagnosed or had a professor who was
100%.
self-diagnosed narcissist. And
Uh-huh.
he like, I mean, owned it.
Yes. He
Owned
was
it.
he was accurate
Yes.
and he owned it.
And I actually really liked him. I was
I
one of
re
the few
I
who
liked him too.
could respect his boundaries.
Yeah.
He held to his boundaries. I mean, shoot, the absences he was strong on. There was like three allowed, and I had four really big things. This was in,
Mhm.
2017 when some big things happened, and
Yeah.
four big things, and I couldn't get that fourth one excused. And I
Uh-uh.
was like, okay, that's the boundary. I get it.
We can
Uh,
accept it.
but they were very open about their diagnosis and often shared things like it's because I'm so insecure in my at my core.
Mm.
And I
And
just love that honesty.
I do too. And he was so honest about the impact then on his partner,
Yep, his wife.
his wife. And so, yeah, I think that this is a very complicated disorder to talk about because people have been really, really, really hurt
Yeah.
by folks with narcissistic personality disorder. So I just want to say, as we're diving into this more, like we see you, we
hmm
know that people have been really hurt by this. None of this is okay.
hmm
We can have empathy for somebody who's struggling with narcissistic traits, but also we're going to talk about boundaries and how to protect yourself and your family.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of possible reactions when a narcissist is confronted or challenged on something. So the sensitivity can show up a couple different ways. It can show up as
hmm
disdain, which is like almost disgust. And I have certainly experienced this with people.
Yep.
And it really does not feel good when they do this because it's kind of like you say something to them and they twist it around and then there's a problem with you. It is not fun. Um,
hmm
and it typically looks like they're looking down their nose at you a little bit. That's the
hmm
feeling. They're going to teach you something. They're going to explain how you screwed something up. Like that's typically what happens.
hmm
Defiance, which we have seen where they double down on the thing
Uh-huh.
that they were challenged about. Social withdrawal.
hmm
Sometimes it hurts so much that they actually will pull away.
Yep.
And that behavior can look really rude and overblown and everything else, but they literally cannot sit with it. It's just too
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah.
Sometimes, too, and Nat, this one I know you know, appearance of humility to mask the grandiosity. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like I'm going to be the most humble son of a gun around. I don't mean any of it, but if I'm going to win at everything, I'm going to win at being humble. And
Yep.
it's obnoxious because it's like the most obnoxious apology of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize these things. I have such a big heart. I care so much. I blah blah blah. And the other person does like internal eye roll.
Yep.
We're over it, right?
Yeah.
Because they're actually trying to portray humility, but it's not congruent
Yep.
to what they're actually feeling. And we know that as people.
Right.
Folks with narcissistic personality disorder, narcissistic traits tend to be selfish, deceitful, and callous.
Mm.
And we have experienced all of those things with the clients
Yep.
that we treat,
Yep.
you know? What are you thinking so far?
I probably shouldn't say.
I want to know.
Well, I'm just thinking of people.
Oh yeah, I know. We yes.
So that's what I'm thinking.
Oh, I
Is
get that.
just thinking. I just have names, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, past, present, whatever.
Oh,
It's not necessarily anyone's super specific, but I think what's just hard is it's similar to borderline in the sense that it gets a really bad rap because of being on the receiving end of it
yeah.
is really hard. And there's not a lot of space to share perspective or feedback because it's rarely, rarely, rarely received. You have to be super
Mm,
self-aware and be able to name the fact that maybe this is something you have or you struggle with.
yes.
And so I think what comes to my mind is similar to the borderline personality disorder episode of it's just hard. It's hard for both people. And the person who maybe struggles with it doesn't know that it's hard, but they know that their relationships can be really hard and
Yes.
not fully understand why.
Which is painful and scary, just like with borderline. If you get broken
Exactly.
up with 25 times in a row and you don't have the insight and the ability to recognize that behavior, it is painful.
When it feels out of your control because you're like, I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. I'm just the nicest guy or gal around. I don't understand.
Well, and I will share something a little personal because my gosh, if you're going to share your near death experience, I can probably share a little something. So, here's the thing. I have an extended family member who is no longer living,
Hmm.
and they were the most classic textbook epitome of
Hmm.
somebody with narcissistic personality disorder.
Mm.
And I was a bit of a quiet kid, which is shocking now, I know now, but I was actually a little shy and I was an observer. I
Mm.
watched everything
Hmm.
and I watched him be pretty destructive to his family.
Hmm.
Okay. So then I'm watching all of this happen and I start pushing back a little if he's unkind to me because I don't play that. Even when I'm quiet, I people don't just walk all over me. I don't allow that.
Right.
So I started trying to put up my little baby boundaries and it never went well. This person could not understand my boundaries, could not respect them even when I was a teenager and would
Hmm.
just come for me. They would
Hmm.
wait until somebody was not in the room and come for
Hmm.
me and be mean or whatever. And the thing that's so interesting about that is now as an adult and having studied this the way that I have, they could not tolerate that I saw them.
Yeah.
And I wasn't having it, and that broke his mind.
Hmm.
Could not figure it out,
Yeah.
and so when this person passed away, this is the part where I'm saying this is clinical, okay?
Yeah.
When this person passed away, this person's wife self-published a biography of his life. So they used to drive to the South. Y'all already know about my Southern aunts, right?
Hmm.
They used to drive to the South and he would dictate his life story and his wife would write all the notes down.
No.
Yep, 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 yep. Uh-huh. I mean, give the man a stage. Like, and I will tell you, funniest storyteller I've ever met in my entire life. Absolutely hysterical.
Mm-hmm.
Could run a group of people, always in
Yes.
the middle of everything. Like, I mean, the dude was awesome, except for the fact that he was unkind to his family.
Right.
Okay, so we go to his funeral. So many people. I don't even know.
Thought you were going to tell me he wrote his own obituary.
No, but that would be hilarious. He wouldn't though, because that's what his wife is for. She did all the she wrote
She writes because
all the
everyone has
things.
to love him so much.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm at his funeral and I was in grad school. So I'm knowing some things now, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
all the things, but some things. And we're in the receiving line with the family. And I have a decently, not a huge family, but a decent sized family. But I mean, there are like, I mean, hundreds of people. Like people are
Mm-hmm.
coming out of everywhere. And it was at a church. And I'm in the receiving line. And everybody keeps telling me, oh, he'd give you the shirt off his back. Oh, he was just the most generous. I'm like, he wouldn't give me a burger at Wendy's. I don't know what you're talking about. He would come visit here and he goes immediately up to Cripple Creek to gamble. I mean, this man did
Mhm.
whatever the hell he wanted at all times.
It was his show.
It was his show. And
Mhm.
often what happens, and the reason I'm sharing this with you guys is because it's one of the reasons I think I got into mental health. I'm
Uh-huh.
almost certain it's the reason I work with people with narcissism,
Mhm.
but also the the bizarre Twilight Zone weird world that we live in with someone like this is they can be genuinely so good to
Mhm.
everybody but the people closest in.
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
can just be adored in other settings, and it's very confusing and it is very hurtful.
And they actually might be really giving to people outside of their family.
Oh, extraordinarily generous,
Very generous.
encouraging.
Yes.
Oh, deep? Sometimes deep. Oh, I
Yeah.
know. And so it gets me a little fired up only because I know the impact of this.
Yeah.
This is an impact and it hurts a lot of people. And while we're saying there's not a ton of people with narcissistic personality disorder fully diagnosable, there's a
Mhm.
lot of people on this continuum and they do a lot of damage.
Yep.
So we just want to acknowledge that.
Yep.
Now, you may think, oh, this is a narcissist. I've got it pegged. This person in my life, this person, my ex-boyfriend, my high school
Mhm.
math teacher, whoever. And you might be right,
Mhm.
but it can also look very different. There's not one way. There's not one way to be a narcissist. Nah, there's lots of ways to be a narcissist. One way is to be that grandiose
Mhm.
presentation, right? Extroverted, great at work, model citizen. They can be antisocial.
Mhm.
They can be actually kind of socially isolated and introverted.
Mhm.
They can be self-loathing and can actually take up a lot of space in that way.
Yep.
Everything's about them and all their problems are all anybody talks about, right?
Mhm.
They can have all the success in business like we talked about, but also not be able to keep a job. That's
Mhm.
something that we see too,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Also, in line with that is functioning on the continuum of low functioning to high functioning.
Mhm.
They can be anywhere on that continuum too. So
Yeah.
my question for you, and this is discussion, not like there's no right answer. I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
curious. At what point does this narcissistic behavior become the disorder? Like, how do people know, oh, this person's just selfish because I haven't set a boundary? Or, oh my gosh, this person actually has a disorder that
Mm.
is having a huge impact on how they think and behave and all of it.
Yeah. I think going back to what we said kind of when we were talking about our professor,
Hmm.
the lack of self-awareness, I think, is one of them.
Yes.
Um, and not just like in one instance, but a theme. When we start to see a theme of very little to no self-awareness of how they're impacting other people,
Low insight.
low insight, Yeah, so I think it happens over time, and it's recognizing these patterns, right? Like,
Hmm.
and also my clinical brain goes to, the DSM criteria, and
Right.
actually having to, people matching the amount that they have
Right.
to match in order to be diagnosed with that. And I think what often happens is people, like we said at the beginning, just see some selfishness, maybe
Hmm.
extreme selfishness, and so they peg them as narcissists. But I think, someone who genuinely struggles with potentially having narcissistic personality disorder, they have no clue that they're selfish. They
Yeah.
don't get it,
They don't get it.
right? Like, I know there are moments, I mean, so much about Press and I. There are moments where I'm like, yeah, that was a jerk move for me, or that was not cool for me to say,
Oh,
right? Or
totally.
my expectation of him doing the dishes. I can name these moments when I'm selfish.
Yes.
And same for him, right? We can both fall on our sword when we know we need to.
Because you have a stable sense of self. If you have a
Yes,
stable sense of self, one behavior doesn't define you, so we can own
exactly.
our behavior.
And then move forward, but that's it, right? I can own it,
Yeah.
and there's safety in owning it. I think with someone who is, who might be on the spectrum or who is diagnosable, there's a few components happening. One, family dynamics, similar to
Yeah.
uh borderline, oftentimes there's trauma, some sort of trauma,
Mhm. Mhm.
and or someone who modeled this behavior as well, this entitlement,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
And so it just makes sense. I just follow suit, and this is my expectation of my family, of my spouse, of whatever.
absolutely.
And yeah, and over time, I mean, especially having such a sensitive sense of self, over time, they build these massive walls or layers to build their own self-esteem up, and then
Mm.
it goes too far, right?
Yeah,
Because it's
to
such a
protect
protection.
themselves.
Yeah. Because oftentimes at some point, by whether it's parents, teachers, other kids, they were told that they were nothing potentially, right? Or
Yeah.
that they couldn't amount to anything. And so they go beyond proving people wrong, and then they can't
Yes.
sit in a space of, I can be wrong sometimes,
Yes.
can make mistakes sometimes. It's not everyone else's fault, right?
No, it makes total sense, and there's a genetic component. The nature, nurture, there's a little bit of nature, we're learning about that all the time. Nurture for sure has an impact. When we think about functional impairment, so functional impairment is the annoying thing that insurance companies make you integrate into treatment plans, right? Like, what is the level of functional impairment?
Mhm.
And to me, that's one of the things that helps tease out if it's just somebody with bad behavior
Mhm.
and if it's clinical narcissism. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is they are impaired typically in their relationships, especially. So, very few people come in and say, I think I'm a narcissist, or I think I have narcissistic personality disorder, and I would like to be assessed for that and treated. Please and
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Handful over the last 15 years, handful,
Right.
right? It is not the norm.
One, most of the time when they say, "Hey, I wanna check this out," they're not.
Exactly. It's almost exclusionary
Yep.
in some ways that
Yep.
if they come in and say, "Gosh, I am just hard on my family and I blah 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 blah." I'm already going, I don't know. I mean, this is a lot of accountability for somebody with narcissistic personality disorder,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So, couple things to keep in mind when we're labeling behavior. Narcissistic personality disorder, again, is inflexible, maladaptive, and persisting.
Mhm.
That is how you know that you're starting to get into a clinical range at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So, what that might look like is it's not just a stressful season at work. It's not
Mhm.
just we're having financial issues and they're kind of spiraling and can't pay attention to their partner. It is persistent and pervasive for a period of time. And it really does start kind of in late adolescence, early adulthood,
Mhm.
and typically does affect other areas, but maybe not in the same way.
Mhm.
So, to be frank, almost every child
Yeah,
is a
right.
baby narcissist. They're
Yes.
supposed to be.
Yes.
Developmentally, that's all they know. Their
Yes.
perspective is their world. They are not going to, nor should they, have
Mhm.
a ton of sensitivity to everyone's feelings around them at all times.
Mhm.
The kids that can do that typically have experienced trauma.
Yep.
So if your child is completely focused on themselves, good for you.
Yep.
That's actually good parenting in some respects because they're
Right.
safe enough to be a little bit self-absorbed. We
Mhm.
want to teach our kids to be kind and generous and all of that, but that's part of parenting. We teach our kids.
Yep.
Teenagers, absolutely narcissists. They are narcissists. They should be, again, developmentally. That is, their brain is literally all about them. They're
Mhm.
figuring out who they are and who they want to be with. They're
Mhm.
judging themselves against other people. They're trying to fit the norms, but also differentiate. It's a wild time to be alive.
Yep.
So
Yep.
please do not bring your teenagers into therapy and say, my daughter's a narcissist or my son's a narcissist, because we judge you for that. I do. I will judge you a little bit if you bring your
It's the
kid in and
same when
tell
they
me that.
say my kid is borderline. I'm like,
Yeah,
you're just
I can't
wrong.
have it. And so just come correct. If you bring your kid to therapy,
Yeah.
number one, the therapist is there to help and they're going to help regardless of what you say.
Yep.
Number two, don't pathologize your children. Just bring them to
No.
therapy. Let us help,
Yeah.
you know? But
Yeah.
typically I give parents the hairy eyeball when they do that because clinically you cannot
No.
diagnose these things in an adolescent or a middle schooler. You're not supposed to because it's a
No.
pervasive pattern in your life.
Yes. And their hormones are going crazy.
Oh my gosh, all the things.
They're meant to be selfish and they're meant to be have hormonal it's our job to help them to regulate,
And
not to diagnose them.
I know I'm being a little hard on this one, but to be honest, when I work with teens,
Mhm.
this actually does come up a lot. And I love the parents. They're bringing their kid in. They obviously care enough
Yes.
to get their kid some help, but it's not, they don't have a personality disorder, not yet.
Right.
They might have some traits, but they are not yet diagnosable.
Yeah.
So, couple pop psychology things. Nat, have you heard some of these kind of terms? Covert narcissist, malignant narcissist, like that kind of stuff, like
Yeah.
pathologies of narcissism that people
Yeah. I haven't
uncover.
looked into it though.
Okay, so I got real curious because
Love that.
I think I mentioned this in the intro episode to personality
Mhm.
disorders. For a 6 to 9 month period of time, almost every woman on my caseload who was having marital problems suddenly had a husband that was a covert narcissist.
Mm. Okay, so for our listeners, what is that defined as?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked. So I found the book. This is
It,
like when I found
is
out,
it titled Covert Narcissist?
I think it is.
No.
No, but you know what? I will share
Verify.
at some
Right.
point. Yeah. But okay. I went and found this book because what I'm learning, the longer I'm in the field, is if I observe something, there's something there typically.
Mhm.
I'm not the first one to think of it either. I'm not that smart. Somebody else has thought of it and has put pen to paper, right?
Mhm.
And there's something out there. So I went and found this book.
Mhm.
It is the tiniest little book you ever want to see. Okay. Little bitty.
Okay.
I can see why so many people read it. It's like a 15-minute read. I don't know. I
Yeah.
was skimming it. They go into this whole thing about covert narcissism, which is not a clinical term,
Mhm.
okay, versus overt. And the point that they're trying to make is some narcissists conceal their behavior much better than others. So an overt narcissist maybe has a little bit less self-awareness, they're a little more in your face with their dysregulation and all that stuff. A covert narcissist is a little bit more manipulative,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit more gaslighty, maybe a little smarter, if I'm honest. I think there may be a little bit of an intelligence piece to that, that they're able
Mhm.
to maneuver a little bit better.
Mhm.
So, I have a couple issues with this. The first one is none of that's clinical.
Mhm.
None of that, the
Right.
labeling of that is
Right.
nonsense. It's not clinical. It's not in the DSM. It is what it is. Okay. I will say, though, in this book, the author did a phenomenal job of identifying some dynamics that happen
Mm.
in a relationship with a narcissistic partner. So I will post the book.
Okay.
Please don't go to your therapist and say that your husband's a covert narcissist. Just work on you and discover things as you go. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole.
Mhm.
But I wanted to talk about that because anything that's hard to understand, we just start taking a shot in the dark and labeling behavior and that kind of stuff. So that's a covert narcissist. I think it might have been from the same book or another one in the same time frame, but I had people coming in calling and it really was almost always female clients coming in calling their husbands a narc.
Hmm. Which means something totally different.
Narc means something totally
It
different.
means you told on someone.
Exactly. It's like
You
a
outed
different,
someone.
it's a different dynamic altogether. So please stop using that term immediately, please
It's
and thanks.
terrible.
And it's very confusing to court ordered therapists,
Yes.
like people who do that work, because we're like, that's not what a narc is not. That's not a
No,
thing.
also that's like such a slang term.
It's aggressive labeling and it's
Yes.
just not helpful. So we
Yeah.
don't need to do that. One of the biggest differential diagnosis pieces with narcissism is actually the same as borderline bipolar.
Hmm.
Bipolar sometimes gets
Interesting.
mixed up. Yeah. So here's why. I thought this was so interesting. Now, I found an article on APA, American Psychological Association,
Yeah.
and they talked about how in a hypomanic or a manic state, it can look very much like narcissism. And so that gets diagnosed sometimes when somebody is in a manic episode. If they go in for therapy or couples therapy or something in the middle of an episode, sometimes they'll get hit with that diagnosis, which is not accurate or helpful. Because here's the difference: bipolar is acute episodes. It can be chronic, but it is chronic acute episodes. It's not persistent all
Right.
the time.
Right.
Narcissism doesn't involve a lack of sleep.
Hmm.
Bipolar does. So if your person or yourself, if you are able to sleep and you don't have sleep disruptions and with ups and downs, probably not bipolar, might be
Hmm.
narcissistic and vice versa. Okay, the other thing that's important to note is bipolar is manageable with medication. Narcissism is not. There's
Right.
not a medication for narcissistic personality disorder. So we want to be mindful with these diagnoses. We want to get as much information as possible so we don't misdiagnose and then medicate for bipolar, which bipolar meds are significant.
They're big.
We can really affect somebody's life if we're not intentional with
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Okay. Question for you.
Hmm.
With all of these different behaviors, how can you manage a relationship with somebody with narcissistic personality disorder without going crazy? Like, we can't just cut off all of our relationships. We can cut off a romantic relationship if we need to with somebody who's not
Yes.
getting better and unwilling to go to treatment, right?
Hmm.
But if we have these people in our life,
Hmm.
maybe we love them, maybe we work with them, maybe we're trying to parent them, maybe we're trying to relate to a parent who is narcissistic. How can you manage this and not go crazy in the meantime?
I feel like that's a trick question.
Not
So if you're on the receiving end of how to manage it,
Mhm. How do you manage a relationship with someone that has narcissistic personality disorder?
okay, I'm going to tell you my perspective and then I'm going to tell you more of a therapeutic response.
So we're gonna get a Natalieism first.
Yeah, which is like I'm not around for that. I don't stick around for stuff like that.
I know. It's
You
really
know, like,
hard.
I'm sorry,
I
that's just
know.
not something that I could do.
You know what we say? I'm going to protect my peace.
Yeah, I'm gonna protect my peace.
Absolutely.
You're invading that. Bye.
Mm-hmm.
So my actual response personally is our relationship wouldn't last,
Yes.
right? But that kind of goes with sometimes level of health matches with level of health.
And you're talking about like romantic relationship.
Yes.
Yes. What about family?
Family relationship, I think if they're not willing or feel unable to build self-insight, self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe get help, boundaries, right? Similar to
Mm,
individuals with borderline.
yes.
You set boundaries. This person might not be someone that you tell big things to.
Yeah.
This is someone that, you can love differently than
Mm,
maybe you would love someone who doesn't struggle with that,
mm,
right? So when it comes to family, I think there's just a boundary thing, right?
yeah.
And reassessing, and this is the hardest thing I think I see people struggle with, reassessing your expectations of what that relationship is going to look like,
Yes.
right?
Because that person may not be able to love you the way you love them
Hmm.
or the way that you want to be loved. They may not be capable. That doesn't mean we're making excuses. It
Hmm.
means we adjust expectations and then emotionally relocate them.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you shared a song with me. Maybe
Mm,
maybe we'll put it on social media, but
it was so good.
oh, it's so good. It's a Megan Trainor song, Bad for
Hmm.
Me. And it's so beautiful because I think it captures that feeling.
Mm, hmm.
The feeling of just not knowing how to deal with someone that you love who can't love you the way that you want to
Yeah,
be loved.
yeah. And needing to set boundaries.
And consistency.
Yep.
This is something you and I've talked about because Nat and I work together. We support each other working with clients, but we are also buds. So
Hmm.
when things come up in our lives,
We share.
we share and we support each other. And I think one of the things that you do super well, Nat, that I appreciate, and I think I do this fairly well too, is just consistency
Hmm.
with the boundaries. That once the boundaries up, it's just up and it doesn't become reactive then because
No.
I'm going to hold that relationship loose. If
Yep.
I hold the relationship too tight, then I get pulled around all the time. If
Yep.
I hold it loose, the rope comes in and out and in and out, but it's not jerking me around because
Right.
I'm just here.
Yep.
But don't you think that requires like a level of not personalizing, which is so hard?
Mm. It's so hard. I think it can be easier when it's maybe someone who like a family member.
Yeah.
It can be really hard at first, but it gets easier. If it's your partner,
Oh, yeah.
that's really hard not to personalize.
Well, and that's kind of, I think, what you were saying earlier is for you, that's a deal breaker.
Oh yeah.
I would not stay married. I'm just saying straight up.
Hmm. Hmm.
I would not stay married to a narcissist
Mm-mm.
unless they were getting really, really great help and they
Hmm.
were willing to get
Own
that
it.
help and
Yep.
own their behavior,
Yep.
which is rare for people to be able to do. Not impossible, but rare.
And own the diagnosis, like our professor. I
Yeah,
I am this,
I have this issue.
and this is really hard.
Yes,
And I want to work on it because I really care about my relationships deep down.
absolutely. And there are a lot of people on the narcissistic personality disorder spectrum that actually can do that. If
Yep.
we as professionals are willing to have those hard conversations with our clients
Yep.
in a gentle, respectful way, some of them will respond.
Hmm.
Now, when they respond, the progress can be kind of slow. They're not going to change overnight. The goals need to be realistic and attainable, and they need a really good relationship with their
Hmm.
therapist. And so you guys don't sit in sessions with Nat and I, but we are just the nicest little bulldozers you ever want to meet. Like, we really treat our clients well. I like to think I love our clients.
Hmm.
We're respectful, we're kind. but we're really steady in the boundaries department. And that's when we see the most progress.
Yep.
And it makes them feel safe too. They won't
Yep.
like it, but a consistent boundary is really helpful for folks who don't even have a consistent relationship with themselves,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So this is a toughie. This is a toughie. In a
Happy.
romantic relationship, this goes hand in hand a lot of times with abuse, emotional,
Mhm. Mhm.
sexual, physical. And
Mhm.
so if you're a victim of any of those things, a survivor, uh,
Mhm.
you have a right to not stay in a situation
Yep.
that is really damaging to you or your children.
Yep.
If you're in a relationship like this and there's hope and there's movement, find a therapist with this expertise.
Yeah. Who's not scared
Nope. Can't be
to
scared. You
go?
cannot play scared with
Yeah.
somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. You just can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you really actually probably, and this is funny because clients with narcissistic personality disorder
Mhm.
don't come because they want therapy. They come because someone in their life said, I'm going to leave your ass if you don't go to therapy.
Yep. Literally, they are wife ordered, husband ordered,
Yep.
or court ordered.
Or court ordered. And they're not thrilled. They're not
Mm-mm.
thrilled to be there. A domestic violence informed and a personality disorder informed therapist
Mhm.
is going to know how to build rapport with that person the best way they can and share some truth at a pace that they can tolerate,
Mhm.
right? Because they have to build distress tolerance to be able to even have these conversations.
Mhm.
But I think there's hope. And I really want to encourage everybody listening, whether you think you might have some of these traits, which you
Mhm.
may be wondering that. I feel pretty good about your prognosis if you're willing to even think about that.
Yeah.
Or if you love someone who
Mhm.
struggles with this, there is hope. There really is treatment for
Yeah.
this. And Nat and I see change. We don't maybe see it resolve all the way very often,
Mhm.
but we see people move towards a healthier dynamic
Yeah.
pretty frequently, actually.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hope.
Yeah.
Now, for grins and giggles, okay?
Okay.
I have a list of characters,
Okay.
fictional characters,
Okay.
that would likely have clinical narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay. Bring it on.
Bring it on. Okay. Regina George.
Absolutely.
Yep. Michael Scott.
Yes. His is annoying.
His is an I love him because he is the type of narcissistic person that I enjoy working with, only in the sense that there is a little bit of heart underneath it. Like he actually does kind of love the people. He's just
Mhm.
so full of himself. He can't
Mhm.
connect in a great way, but there's a
Mhm.
softness about him that I actually do like.
Yep.
Chuck Bass from Gossip Girl.
Yes. Same. He fits in there with Michael Scott.
And also allegedly maybe one in real life as well. I don't know if you've read about that, but he's
Him.
actually a fairly abusive human being, yes.
Oh no.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Uh-huh. Joe Goldberg from the show You, the stalker
Yep.
show that you and I love. Please watch it on Netflix. We have a stalking episode coming up. But Joe Goldberg,
Yep.
narcissist.
Yep.
Straight up narcissist. Dr. House from the TV show House. He's
Oh yes.
you know what I'm talking
Absolutely.
about?
Yep.
Cartman from South Park.
Yep.
Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Okay. I didn't watch Game of Thrones.
Because she's an epic narcissist. I know that you think this show is too rapey. I understand it, but we may have to watch it someday and just fast forward the rapey parts. Because,
Let's just skip to season 2. I hear season 2 gets better.
oh my gosh, it's so. Anyway, that's for another day. Miranda Priestley from Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah.
This one is going to upset people. I understand. I understand. But it is also very much true. Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City.
Yes.
I hate it because I actually love her, but yes,
Yep.
girlfriend is full of herself.
Yes.
So I came up with this little thing that I want to run by you, and then we're going to close out for tonight.
Okay.
So I was thinking about about the concept of people being like an emotional vampire, right? We hear this all the time, like in a
Hmm.
independent kind of way.
Hmm.
So I was thinking the personality disorders have like different types of vampirism. I don't know how you would say it. Okay.
Yeah.
Borderline, I feel like, is the emotional vampire. Like a borderline just sucks
All
all
of it.
the emotion in and it hurts them and typically hurts everyone around them.
Yeah.
Somebody with histrionic personality disorder, which we've already talked about in a past episode, so we're probably not going to do a special on it.
Yeah.
Attention vampire. They want
Yeah.
all of the attention, eyes on me. I want to be the center of everything.
Yes.
For narcissistic personality disorder, what do you think? What kind of vampire is someone with narcissistic personality?
One that looks in the mirror all the time.
Wait, aren't vampires not supposed to look in the mirror? Is that a
They
thing?
just can't see themselves. So
Well,
they're
you
always
know
trying.
what? That is a pretty deep metaphor,
I
friend.
know.
A vampire really cannot see themselves in the mirror.
So, and neither can someone who could be diagnosed with borderline. They don't see themselves.
You're just such a genius.
I know. But what were
You
you
know,
thinking?
you're such a genius. I don't really know, but
Oh, well.
I was thinking about like admiration. Like they need
Mm,
all the credit, all the admiration.
mhm,
And it's funny because we have a joke in our house with Honey, because
mhm,
she's a lot
mhm,
and just loves everything and everyone. And so the joke in our house is only love for Honey
mhm,
because if we hug each other, she gets in the middle. If it
mhm,
even sounds like we're going to hug each other or talk to each other, she's got to be in the middle of it. She will
mhm.
bark, she will talk. Like,
Oh yeah, I mean, homegirl like full on French kissed me one time.
oh,
So,
she really loves you. Like crush loves a
I
little
mean,
bit.
like literally tongue in the mouth surprise
Yeah, yep.
situation.
She's quick.
She is.
She will get in
She's
there.
got to be quicker than.
You you gotta be quicker than Honey, that's for sure. Well, I hope that this episode has given you guys some things to think about. We'll be referencing narcissism, I am quite sure, in
Hmm.
future episodes because it comes up so much in our work and in the cases that we talk about.
Yep.
But again, we have a lot of compassion, um, and a real desire to help people make change. And we've seen people make change. So we want you to be hopeful,
Yep.
but also protect yourself in
Yep.
appropriate ways with good boundaries, limits, and sometimes removing yourself if you really have to. And that's
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So thanks for joining. We will get you the story of
Hmm.
Nat's survival experience in the next couple of weeks. So
Yep.
we're not being cryptic on purpose. We're just still kind of unpacking it ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
And stay tuned, y'all, because Friday is Wade Wilson part 2.
Join us.
And he gets sentenced this week. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that too.
Ooh.
Ooh. All right, friends. We will see you next week.
As always.
Bye, forensic friends. I'm Janine.
And I'm Nat.
And as always, thanks for listening and join us next week for more crime, psychology, and heart.